So this morning, I'm speaking on the spiritual practice of allowing all our humanness. There's a great quote from Byron Katie who said, "When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time." And it's easy to allow life when everything is going our way, right? When things are just so as we want them to be. But it's more challenging to allow things we didn't want to happen, right? That it's harder to allow for feelings of disappointment, right? Or sadness or insecurity or fear. So one of you asked for a talk when I did a survey. You asked for a talk on fear. And so I actually I'm addressing that in this talk as well because it is one of the most challenging things to allow. Boy, when we feel fear, we want to do anything but allow it. But we can open it, we can meet it. We can meet the things that scare us, that create fear in us. And it is a lifetime practice. I found some funny facts about fear. There was a study that found that speaking in front of a crowd is the number one fear. And number two is death. Which basically means that if you go to a funeral, you'd rather be the one in the casket than giving the eulogy. When I die, I want to die like my grandfather who died peacefully in his sleep, not screaming like all the passengers in his car. But don't worry, I intend to live forever. So far, so good, right? There's a saying by Zig Ziglar about fear that F-E-A-R has two meanings. It has two meanings. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Isn't that good? So we have a choice. He says, the choice is yours. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise, or somewhere in between, which is what probably most of us do. So the spiritual practice of allowing is a kind of face everything and rise. It's a way of living in non-resistance to what is. It's a way we flow with life and whatever life brings. It reminds me of the Tao Te Ching. There's so many quotes about water and flowing with life, and one that I love is, "That which offers no resistance overcomes the hardest substances." That which offers no resistance overcomes the hardest substances. And it's not by any means passive. It's not passive. It's consciously meeting what is without fighting the present moment. It's a way that we are a good spiritual friend to ourselves by allowing ourselves our full humanness, right? How neurotic we become when we tell ourselves you're allowed to be this part of human, but not this part of human. Anybody do that? Something that I've discovered in this life journey is when I can fully allow all my humanness, all my feelings, including those of loss, those of sadness, that exist with all the happiness and joy. There's plenty of that too. But if I can equally allow the tears and the fears and the grief, and be for myself, right? Like a mother that's willing to hold her child when she's crying until she finally feels safe. If I can be like that for myself, like the mother that carries me, the mother that is just willing to hold me until I finally feel safe, if I can give that to myself, then a profound peace arises, a profound inner calm arises. I love the teachings of Pema Chodron. I don't talk about her that often, but how important it is that she says that we make friends with our hopes and our fears again and again. Make friends with our hopes and our fears again and again, and meet whatever we're going through without, on the one hand, indulging, and on the other hand, repressing. Right? Meet that place in the middle where we can just let it be. There's a poem. There's a paragraph in a poem I love by Araya Mountain Dreamer. She wrote, "It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow. If you have been opened by life's betrayals. If you have been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or yours, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and stand still at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. Yes, bring it. Yes, I trust life no matter what, right? In my retreats, we often do an exercise after a morning of meditation and chanting where I pair people up and we share what's been most difficult, if you've ever been in a retreat with me. What's been most difficult lately? And as people tell that story and they feel those feelings, there's a lot of energy in the room. The energy gets really intense. And then I have everybody breathe and rest back into that awareness we just cultivated. And it brings this kind of spacious, gracious energy that allows our feelings, that lets our feelings be and have room. And so that we're not just lost in the story. We're not just lost in the feelings. We've got all this gracious, spacious awareness around them. And then, in that energy, they transform. They find their way. And we find the meaning in what we're going through. But it's so important that we bring that energy of mindfulness, of awareness, to whatever we're feeling. You know, that energy makes it okay to feel whatever we're feeling, right? It's okay to be human and have our grief and have our fear, right? And have our sadness. And so this kind of meeting is like this equanimous way that we meet what is right in the middle, you know, versus indulging over here or repressing over here. Pema says, to the degree we're willing to see our habit of indulging or repressing clearly, that habit begins to wear itself out. And wearing out is not exactly the same as going away. It's better. Instead, a wider, more enlightened perspective arises. And I really see that in my self-reflection practice, right? You know, for example, say you go home today and you get a notice in the mail that starting the first of the year, your rent goes up and your health insurance goes up and your blood pressure goes up. And so, you know, a movement towards indulging might be to break out that nice bottle of wine in the fridge, you know, and tell yourself a story of what a victim you are, right? That would be an example of indulging. Repressing might be telling yourself, just get over it, buck up, you know, like, and stop being dramatic and suppress the anxiety, which will probably later come out in some kind of a health issue, right? But to land in the middle, right, where you consciously allow this hardship, right? It would mean maybe just getting in touch with your feelings, perhaps sharing them with a trusted friend, journaling, walking in nature, turning to all the things that bring in awareness, just a little bit more of that awareness energy, and then focusing on emotional self-care and creating a plan to address the concerns. It is the consciousness, the awareness that brings the answers. So we have to bring that in. So, you know, this art of allowing, it's really noticing if there's an urge to indulge or if there's an urge to repress, right? And to meet that moment with this deeply wise and compassionate part of our being, right? The mother within us. So I have a friend who tends to avoid all difficult feelings, and you know, I see how they can't be compassionate with themselves, and that means they can't really be compassionate with somebody else, right? That's kind of what happens. So this might be a place we need to grow, right? I've been such a healthy person my entire life, and lately I've had a health challenge that has not been terribly easy. But I have to say that I don't fight it, right? I don't think that something's wrong. I just meet it without judgment and with a lot of curiosity. You know, I love Eckhart Tolle's. One of my favorite Eckhart Tolle quotes is, we get to a point in our evolution where we use everything to evolve, right? Everything that happens, that's the path. That's our spiritual path. And, you know, we see how we can grow. We see how we can grow. I see many ways I can grow. Like I grow in compassion when I realize how we all have to face our mortality. We all do, and we can do so very consciously, very consciously. I grow by seeing how, you know, facing our fears is something we as humans must gain skill at. We really need skill at that. And I see how spiritual friends caring about one another in the Sangha is so important for each one of us to fortify our courage when life is challenging. Having a sense of humor is incredibly helpful. Having a sense of humor, it's so helpful. There's a funny story about a doctor who decides he has to tell the truth to his patient who is not long of this world. So he goes to his patient and he says, you know, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you, I don't think you're going to be very long of this world. Now, is there anybody you'd like to talk to? And the man with barely a breath left in his body says, yes. And the doctor says, who is it? He goes, another doctor. Oh. Pema has a great sense of humor. Do you know her? Have you done workshops with her? Oh, many. Oh, lucky you. I'd love to be with her. But she has such a gentle way of helping us see our patterns, right, and our habits. She's very compassionate. She transmits that self-compassion. She writes that we can't attain enlightenment, let alone feel contentment and joy, without seeing who we are and what we do, without seeing our patterns and our habits. This is called Maitri, developing loving kindness and an unconditional friendship with ourselves. I love that, unconditional friendship with ourselves. I think we're hardest on ourselves. So, yeah, she says, can we be a good friend to ourselves and cease to practice harshness? That's a nice practice. Cease practicing harshness. She says, cease to practice disapproval. Just cease, just stop it. And learn to practice gentleness and letting go. We can allow ourselves and each other and meet whatever arises with curiosity and not make it such a big deal. Yeah, the more we are allowing with ourselves, the more we're allowing with others. So Pema talks about how sometimes when we feel discomfort, we have an urge to hurry up and change it. Or have you ever been with a friend who wants you to hurry up and change it? You know, like snap out of it. Maybe a parent taught you that way. And she said that when we want to hurry up and change our mood, that it leads to calling in the babysitters. And the babysitters, she says, are sometimes alcohol or sugar or food, or we medicate. We're looking for a way to get comfort, right, to distract ourselves. And she points out that even like the Buddhist monastic rules that advise renouncing alcohol and sex and so on are not pointing out that those things are inherently bad or immoral, but that we use them as babysitters, as a way to escape and get comfort. And that the real renunciation on the spiritual path is that we renounce the tenacious hope that we could be saved from being who we are. in all our humanness. And so instead, we make what's happening a mindfulness practice, right? We have the courage to relax with our situation and allow for the feeling that feels unsteady, right? Allow for the feeling that feels insecure, right? And learn to be with it with awareness versus run from it or distract from it or numb it. David Whyte spoke about this in his poetry. He wrote, to be equal to fierce circumstances. To be equal to fierce circumstances. We make ourselves larger than the part of us that wants to flee. I love that. While not losing its protective understandings about when it might be appropriate. There are times we should flee. But he says, in turning towards the source of fear, we have a possibility of finding a different way forward, a larger good, through circumstances rather than away from them in some supposed safe area where threats no longer occur. If you find that place where threats no longer occur, please take me there. You know what's so funny about us as humans is, our idea of what evolves us. Like if we were to choose what evolves us, it would never be these things that turn us upside down and inside out. It would be so gentle that we actually never evolve, right? So I would not have chosen losing my house in the Paradise Fire, and I certainly wouldn't have chosen losing my mom and the depth of grief and just life-changing transformation that put me through. And yet, life happens. Is that a bumper sticker? Life happens. And these moments that stretch us to the max, can turn us into something more beautiful. In fact, I think they usually do, if we're willing. That's the clause, if we're willing. Back in 1993, I wrote a song, Embrace It, and the words go, embrace it, all that seems dark. Embrace it, all that seems unlovable. Embrace it and be whole again. Oh, adventurer, nothing can be left out. Faith is the brother of doubt. How about loving the fearful into wholeness, into holy oneness? Loving the fearful into holy oneness. Pema says that all anxiety, all distraction, all reasons for hoping that our experience could be different are rooted in our fear of death. And that fear of death is always in the background. That's something to contemplate. And we're raised in a culture that fears death. That's why I talk about it so much, so we get over that, right? But, we always hope our own death will be definitely later, much, much later, right? And yet we have little deaths every day. We have disappointments. We have a health challenge. We have a relationship that didn't work out, right? Things that we hoped for that didn't happen. But it is through our spiritual practice we can grow the ability to have a friendly relationship with death and become able to relax with insecurity, with things not working out, and not need to call the babysitter so fast, right? There's a great story, Pema tells great stories about meeting fear. I love this story. And it's a story about how we learn to not lose ourselves in fear. So once there was a young warrior. Her teacher told her that she had to do battle with fear. She didn't want to do that. It seemed too aggressive. It was scary. It seemed unfriendly. But the teacher said she had to do it and gave her the instructions for the battle. The day arrived. The student warrior stood on one side and fear stood on the other. The warrior was feeling very small and fear was looking big and wrathful. They both had their weapons. The young warrior roused herself and went towards fear, prostrated 3 times, and asked, "May I have permission to go into battle with you?" Fear said, "Thank you for showing so much respect that you asked permission." Then the young warrior said, "How can I defeat you?" And fear replied, "My weapons are that I talk fast and get very close to your face. Then you get completely unnerved and you do whatever I say. You do whatever I say. But if you don't do what I tell you, I have no power. If you don't do what I tell you, I have no power. You can listen to me, you can have respect for me, you can even be convinced by me. But if you don't do what I say, I have no power." In that way, in that moment, the student warrior learned how to defeat fear. I just love that. We can respect fear, right? But if we don't do what it says, right? If we don't close down because we're scared, or if we don't give up because we're scared, or we don't give in because we're scared, if we don't indulge or repress because we're scared, then we defeat fear, and we defeat it. Maybe we fear we'll lose our independence, right? And we won't be able to take care of ourselves. I think that is definitely a pretty major fear as you're getting older. It's a scary thought, and fear talks fast, right? It talks fast, and it feels close to our face, and it unnerves us. We can listen to that. We can respect it. We might even be convinced by it. But what if we don't do what it says? What if we don't let fear consume us? So we can explore. I invite you to explore the FEAR, face everything and rise. I was thinking about how I face my own fears, how I've been facing them like in the last few weeks. I see when I indulge my fears, my blood pressure increases and I feel uncentered. And I recognize pretty quickly the need to be that, unconditional friend to myself. One of the simple things that I've done in the last 2 weeks, I do this every once in a while, is I found a wonderful online meditation on inner calm, deep inner calm. And it's just 10 minutes, but boy, does it tune me up. I listen to it, especially before sleep. And it's like this man's voice, it's so calming, and he tells me to breathe and relax my body and go to my favorite place in nature. And I always go to Cliff Lake in Mount Shasta, and I sit on that rock, and I look at that diamond light sparkling on the water, and I let that diamond light come into me and soothe my nervous system and my mind and my body. And then the leaves that float by on that little stream, I just let my tension, my worry, my fear, my anxiety float away. And I feel so much better. And so these simple little things, that we can find to put another little tool of well-being into our daily well-being program are really important. We want to find these things that deepen our well-being. Pema says well-being of mind is like a mountain lake without ripples. When the lake has no ripples, everything in the lake can be seen. Everything in ourself can be seen. When the water's all churned up, nothing can be seen. The still lake without ripples is an image of our mind at ease, so full of unlimited friendliness for all the junk at the bottom of the lake. And we're so friendly, we don't need to churn up the waters just to avoid looking at what's there. I love that. It's so beautiful. So maybe we see we don't have it all together, right? Maybe we see, does anybody not have it all together? Let's just admit it now. Get that out of the way. Maybe we see that we don't have a lot of well-being, and that's good. We want to see that. That's the beginning of clarity, of earnestly stepping on the path towards more freedom, towards more peace, right? It's okay. The gist of a lot of Buddhist teaching is that, lasting security here in this world is futile. It's futile. It's unrealistic. Can we just let that be the way it is and accept it with peace, right? That's the practice. So we can view our spiritual practice as whatever is happening now in all its messiness and imperfection. Reminds me of a Rumi poem, The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So, my friends, I invite you to be good spiritual friends to yourself, right? And practice approaching all your experiences and feelings with acceptance And see everything you're experiencing as temporary guides. See all your experiences as temporary guides from beyond for your growth, right? And I invite you to be curious and soften judgments, right? Soften harshness and allow your humanness and grow in this practice of allowing. You know, we are so good at welcoming our divine nature. We want to welcome our human nature also. So may you and all your loved ones and may all beings be happy, be at peace, and be free. Thank you all. Love you all.